All right, we are back. Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to another Future Focused weekly update where I will run through some of the latest happenings at the intersection of business, technology, and the human experience. I have got quite a lineup this week, so I will move through them. Well, we'll see relatively quickly. Have a lot to say on all of them. But for those of you who have been listening for a while, thank you. Appreciate the messages and the support along the way. Glad you find this helpful. And by all means, feel free to share feedback too. If there's things I can be doing to make this better, more valuable to you, let me know. And if this is your first time, I hope you find value in it. And for anybody who does find value, please share it with a friend. Let them know about it, review it wherever you're listening to it. Always helps other people find it. So I appreciate that as well. With that, I'm going to jump right into it, right out of the gate. One of the big things that I noticed this week, so Apple and OpenAI deal has officially been inked. I know there's been some back and forth, and if you've been listening to my stuff for very long, I've been watching to see what Apple was going to do, at least when it came to where they're going to go with OpenAI. There were talks with them with Google. Now, granted, the big Apple, I think it's the Apple conference, is coming up June 10th through the 14th. So we will probably find out a lot more details of what that looks like. But the talk and the anticipation around this is that we're going to be seeing basically OpenAI as an AI assistant on every Apple device, every iPhone out there. So we'll actually be able to see this, which is really interesting for me. One of the things that I had a bit of a nostalgic moment on this one was the fact that I had the gentleman who was part of the original technology that was used for Siri. So he was part of the team. He actually led the team that created the original technology for these. And we talked about really, while Siri was thought of as an AI assistant, which there was some AI to it, it wasn't based on any of these transformer models or anything like this. So it was relatively dumb AI in terms of the capability that it had, which I know my personal experience with Siri has been, I don't use it very much. And so we'll see what happens because I'm an Apple person. So we'll see whether I start using my AI assistant on my phone much more. I'm also really curious as we get into Apple maturing this and getting it into its tech. I know the new OS is coming with all this stuff. I'm really curious to see how advanced and what kind of functionality we see with our AI assistants in terms of its ability to, will it just be like having the ChatGPT app natively built into your phone? Will it be able to completely interact with all your different apps and do all the different things? Will it be able to see what's in all your other apps, which I'm going to talk about Microsoft's recall later today, but this opens up new doors in some ways in terms of how we may think about our interactions with AI assistants. And, one of the things that I think anybody who's listened to me for any period of time knows that I would just caution people with this is I've been saying for a while now, when you looked at AI adoption, there were a fair amount of people when you looked at the survey data who said, yeah, I use ChatGPT or Cloud or whatever, but I don't use it every day, or I don't use it, I maybe use it once a day, a few times a week type of a thing, which for me personally is surprising because I use this stuff all the time, but I get it. For a lot of people, the whole process and need to go to one of these tools hasn't necessarily been super relevant. Now, though, as it goes into our phones, a device that we are already carrying with us literally everywhere we go and all of these things, I think the risk for AI dependency is only going to rise even further as we become more reliant on AI doing a lot more for us, which is why I'm really interested to see what kind of functionality and capability, what kind of multimodal capability will the AI assistant have. We've seen some real advancements with this recently. And so will Apple get the latest next gen version of this, or will it be a dumbed down version, a 3.5, something like that, that's more cost effective and scalable? I don't think, at least unless somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't been able to find any details as to that. So I'm looking forward to playing around with it a little bit more. We don't have to wait very long, but it will be interesting to see. And again, I think one of the watch outs is how dependent we become which ties to update number 2, which some of you may have not even noticed. Others of you, and I'm actually a regular AI user, I'm using these tools all the time. I actually didn't notice it, but there was apparently a significant ChatGPT outage earlier this week. I think it was on Tuesday or something like this. And so I did a little bit of digging into it. So going back to AI dependency, it was all over the map on this. I saw everything from people who were posting about it or acting as though life had ended as they know it simply because they couldn't get access to ChatGPT. Then there were a lot of other people that went, ChatGPT went down, I didn't even know, type of a thing. And I think one of the indicators of this, though, was some of the stories as I dug into it wasn't just individuals. So, yeah, you had the individuals that went, oh my gosh, like I don't even know what to do, which that in and of itself, I think is concerning. And I think going back to my previous point, this is something we need to be really mindful of. If you are becoming, if ChatGPT going out or the thought of ChatGPT or your favorite language model going out gives you anxiety, you might want to take a break right now and reflect on the fact why and what is going on there, because you might want to evaluate, am I becoming too dependent on this? Now, granted, I will admit there have been times where ChatGPT or Anthropic has been having a bad day, and I've been really frustrated because I was trying to do something with it in that moment and I couldn't. And so it was like, it's just not even worth it for me to do this the traditional way. So I'll just have to put it on hold. And I didn't really want to put it on hold. So that's where I understand and can empathize with just legitimate frustration where I was planning on doing this and it's really not worth the work to not do it this way. So I guess I'll delay it, but I really didn't want to do that. I think if you're frustrated in that sense, that's fine. If the frustration or the anxiety that comes is you legitimately almost don't know how to do whatever it is that you were planning on doing, I actually would encourage you to take a pause there and take a step back and go, you know what? That's actually not going to be healthy for you, because the reality is, as much as these models and all this technology is, super powerful, super capable, all these other things, it's not infallible. And inevitably, there are going to be times, just like the internet, it's going to go out. And for individuals, if that's freaking you out, you just don't need to be in that place. As a more comical example, I think about a big storm that came through recently and knocked the power and the internet out, which, when you've got a whole bunch of kids, that's not necessarily the most fun thing. But my wife is, she was a little worked up about it. And I tend to just was more like, whatever, we'll pull Monopoly out of the closet and play a game of Monopoly and go sit outside and go do something else. Like, it's fine. We'll watch the rainstorm from the front porch. It's not a big deal. So I think that's the thing that we just need to be really mindful of. But it was entertaining to watch this. The part that I think is more concerning, so there's the individuals who are disrupted by that. And that would be the reflection I would encourage everybody to go, am I getting a little over dependent on this? If the outage made you sweat, might want to take a breather. What was more concerning to me was, as I dug into some of the stories about the outage, of legitimate businesses that went down for a period of time, or major workflows that were disrupted as because of a break in Chat GPT. And I think that's something that is, even more concerning. And for business leaders who listen to this, or think, people who are considering going massive into automation for some of this technology, what I think we're seeing and what I saw through some of this is people started investing and going full force into automation and the use of AI in their workflows and in their businesses. They didn't have any sort of mitigation or contingency plans. And so when it went down, things came to a screeching halt. There was no like, let's shift over to auxiliary power and move things forward, or this is the way we go about it in an analog fashion until things come back up. And I hope that the businesses and the organizations that were disrupted by this, I hope this was because it didn't last very long. The outage wasn't all that long, but I hope this was a bit of a reckoning call to, hey, that's fine. Go ahead and lean on this technology, leverage it, start to do some of these things, but you better have a backup plan. And I think that's true for individuals as well, that you better have a backup plan. If your whole business is built on one of the large language models and you literally don't even know how it works or how you would operate if it wasn't there, you are extremely, extremely vulnerable. And I am telling you, as much as we like to think of these as infinite sources of whatever and there's no risk to them, they are going to have downtime, and there are going to be times when we cannot access this, especially because unlike the internet, which is like the power grid, it's widely distributed. You're never going to see. OpenAI goes down. So many of the companies that have tools that they say they're AI tools, but really their AI is borrowed from OpenAI. It's almost like taking the queen down in a nest. Like the whole thing just shuts down. And I don't think people always realize how intricate this web is and how many dominoes start falling when the queen, gets knocked out. And so I think this over dependency, well, yeah, that might disrupt an individual. You can probably recover. If you can't get into ChatGPT for the afternoon, well, you might have to take a little more time, or maybe this priority gets shifted to tomorrow while you work on something else. When your operation shuts down, that can cost millions of dollars. And that's where some of the stories I was reading, I was like, you invested this much into AI automation and had zero contingency plan for what to do when that shut down. And I think that is something that, one, we're going to have to see how the big AI companies come to address it, because like SaaSes, like other platforms, they're going to have some sort of guarantee around downtime and stuff like that to ensure that things like that don't happen, but they're going to happen. And that's the reality of it. And I think, again, my concern is there's really only a handful of these companies. And so a lot of the companies that you think are AI companies are actually, yes, they're AI companies, but their AI is hooked into an actual bigger model. And without that bigger model, they literally completely can't function. So for people out there who are automating, who are leaning on a lot of this technology for their workflows, you'd probably be wise asking some deeper questions to the vendors, to the partners that you're using, to find out, hey, what models are you using and what kind of downtime agreements do you have? Because even when ChatGPT started coming up, just like any good company, they make decisions over who gets priority access as it comes back from an outage and things like that. And you probably want to find those things out and be asking those questions if you're partnering with an AI company to do some of the work and you're tapping it into critical infrastructure to your organization. I think this week was a bit of a wake up call to people that if you are over dependent and you do not have mitigation plans, you are at real risk, and this will cost you in the long run. And so hopefully that just, again, I'd be curious to hear some stories from folks, whether you even noticed it, whether whether you didn't and it was no big deal. But I had a few friends who were in organizations that literally business shut down because of this. It was like a snow day back in the day from school where everybody just didn't kind of know how to get their work done because all their systems went out. So anyway, we'll see. I have no doubt there will be more of that as we move forward. And it's something that the AI companies, but again, going back to the end of my message last week, we have a lot more autonomy and responsibility in making sure we're prepared for this stuff than we often think. And if we're just counting on the big companies and everybody else to take care of it for us, we're in trouble, and you're putting yourself in unnecessary risk. So just watch it. Shifting gears over to, I'm curious. So I'm a Mac user. I'm an Apple user, have not used Windows in a very long time. So it was very entertaining to me as I started digging into Microsoft Recall, which, for those of you who are not familiar, or maybe you didn't even realize it was on your computer now, Microsoft Recall is essentially looking and memorizing literally everything that you do on your computer so that at any point in time, you can, in natural language, ask your computer a question and it can go back and find the exact moment and snapshot when that happened. So if you were having a conversation with someone on one of your apps and you didn't remember who it was or whatever, you can give it some general context and it will have remembered absolutely everything that you did and be able to find that for you. I'm curious what people's reactions to that were because the internet did not feel super great about it. And the blowback on Microsoft has been pretty intense in terms of, I think Microsoft thought it had a lot more trust with people than it does. I think there's a lot of hesitation from people around technology and how comfortable they feel with technology, knowing literally, not only knowing, I mean, I think everybody's familiar with the fact that your computer knows everything you're doing, but it's not necessarily storing that and memorizing it. So at any point you can pull that back. And so there's a lot of concerns from people. First of all, one about what is that, where is that data, what are the data management practices, who has access to it, all this other stuff, but also the cybersecurity risks that people are saying, like, wait a minute, like this thing is literally memorizing every password I type, every URL I go to, every email I exchange, every single word I type on my screen, the transcript of every video I watch. Like it's literally memorizing all of that, which from a convenience standpoint, I guess helpful that you can ask that if you're struggling to remember. But I think, again, one of my concerns with this is the tech dependency. So yes, there's the cybersecurity and the data risks I think are serious and we need to be mindful of. But there's, again, also this dependency risk where, man, I think about GPS and the people who don't even know how to get to a grocery store 5 blocks from their house without typing it into Waze. And I go, you really want to go through your day and just not remember any of it because you're counting on AI remembering everything? And as long as you can generally have a sense of what went on, you'll just ask it and expect it to bring it back to you. I think it's just setting up an environment where people are able to just be essentially anesthetized and go through life going, yeah, I do things. I don't really think about it. I don't really put much thought into it because I'll just refer back to it if I ever get there. So one, I have some real concerns about, the kind of psychological and just physical behavior impacts this will have on people, right alongside the legitimate concerns around this. Now, the one part where I would maybe push back on some of the hype of, oh, Microsoft is looking at everything you're doing. And some of it is people's lack of understanding of technology, and that like literally anything you're doing with technology is being tracked. Now, you may not know it. It may not necessarily be a nice little icon you can click on and ask it to recall all that stuff. But I think sometimes we are a little too confident in our anonymity and go, well, because I'm on my computer, no one else can really tell what I'm doing. And I think we all should probably have a mindset and an attitude of, how about just always assume that everything you're doing, someone could find and figure out. So if you're not proud of it, don't do it. Now, I want to be careful when I say that because I think sometimes this can be used inappropriately as a way of like blaming people for just wanting to have privacy and saying, listen, I'm not saying I want to be able to, work in incognito mode and have nobody know what I'm doing. I'm just saying, who has access? And I think those are legitimate concerns. And Microsoft has come out and they've said the data is stored locally. No one has access to it, types of things like that. But I can't remember the article I read. It was just showing how vulnerable that is and how easy it is to exploit. And that if you really wanted to, get a hold of somebody's information, all it would take is a minor exploit to be able to get in and actually get access to this. So again, I have some concerns about it. Clearly, the market has responded. It'll be interesting to see what Microsoft ends up doing with this. again, I don't think the technology is going away. I think what was funny to me about the whole thing is I'm like, this has probably been happening on your computer for a very long time. I mean, what do you think that search bar in your thing is doing? It's monitoring everything you're doing. So when you ask, it can pull this stuff up. I mean, it knows everything that's on your computer and every website you've been to, everything you've done. They basically now they just made a button so you actually know that you're interacting with it and asking for it. I think it's just access to data that has always been there that just now there's an easier tool to get to it, which again, I think just opens the cybersecurity risks because, well, now it's so much easier to get to, but who's getting to it and what are they doing with it? So, from what I can tell, just looking into some of these things, I don't necessarily have major well, I do. I have some concerns about it in terms of the security and what it could all mean. And I think it also is an indication of where people are from a trust standpoint. There's a really low trust level from society in big tech. I think people are very uncomfortable with what these tech companies are doing and what access they have to data and what they might be able to do with that, which is a legitimate concern. I think it also just shows where we are from a readiness, which in some ways I'm encouraged by, because going back to the dependency and some of these things, I think sometimes our resistance to going, this is a little too weird for me, I'm not quite ready for it yet, will help slow things down a little bit, just because it's not going to change the fact that tech companies have the capability. But what it may do is slow down implementation. It may slow down, that may make change direction in this. But for anybody who has Microsoft recall and or freaked out about Microsoft recall, I guess my question would be, are you just as freaked out about the idea of, an OpenAI assistant on your iPhone that essentially would probably be able to do the exact same thing? I don't know if it goes quite to the level of that. And again, I haven't had a chance to experiment with the capability to know yes or no on these things. But lot of blowback. Go ahead and look it up. And again, if you are somebody who was not aware of Microsoft recall, and you are a little uncomfortable if you do use Windows machines and are a little uncomfortable with the idea of Microsoft literally seeing everything you're doing, it, recording it, and storing it so you can pull it up at a later time. If the creepy factor overwhelms the convenience factor for you, there is a way you can disable it. So I would, I'm not going to walk through it here, but go, if you just Google how to disable Microsoft recall, it's a matter of steps. It's been a while since I've been on a Windows machine, but I looked through the steps. It's pretty easy through your settings and your security and privacy settings. You just flip it off. And then supposedly it's not going to be doing it, even though it's probably still capturing the same information. Who knows? But just so you know, it is something that I at least want to bring awareness to, because I do know a lot of people are Windows users and you may be uncomfortable with that. And so you should at least be aware of what it is, aware of its capability, because a lot of these things in your systems, in your OS, you get an update, they just activate and they default opt in. And some people just don't want that. And if you don't, that's totally cool. I probably would disable it because I prefer to be, I would not want that. So if it was my choice, I would probably disable it. So if you're wondering, what would you think? My advice would be turn it off. Just be more present and cognizant of what you're doing, and take notes elsewhere or something like that if you really need to. I don't know that we need to be able to simply pull back everything, but maybe other people feel otherwise. And if you do, send me a note. I'm curious what you think. Are you all for Microsoft recall, or does it make you uncomfortable? All right. So the next one ties to a video that I saw the other day by a YouTuber. His name's Robert Miles. He has a whole YouTube channel dedicated to AI safety. Really fascinating stuff. I enjoy his work. So Robert, if by some chance you ever listen to this, keep doing the awesome work you're doing. I love that you're drawing attention to safety and things that we need to be concerned about and things that we should be paying attention to, so that we can again be thinking 10 steps ahead and looking around corners rather than just going, I'm sure it'll be fine, because the reality is a lot of these things won't. And so the video in particular that I wanted to just share on this, to just give people some food for thought, not necessarily to incite fear, but more just to have people understand why it's so important we think about these and how some of these unanticipated risks can show up. And if we're so quick to just move on AI models, thinking, yeah, sure, let's just automate, especially with the way AI works now. And going back to, I referenced it before when I was talking about the Apple AI. I had the gentleman on who was part of the team that created the technology that powered Siri. And one of the things we talked about was the way AI has changed, where AI used to be you needed to program everything you wanted it to do. So it really was very, very dumb. It, excuse me. And you had to tell it everything you wanted to do. So you had to think of every possible scenario and think of, what is every way that somebody might ask this question? And what if they ask it like this? Or what if they have this accent? And you had to think about all these things. And then you would build that into the AI and it wouldn't really go outside. So you were basically you had to build like literally every road and pathway you wanted for it. Now where we are with AI is it's literally like open range. It can go anywhere, it can do pretty much anything all on its own, and it will. And so you almost need to, instead of building all the pathways you want it to take, it will literally take all the pathways on its own. And you need to build the guardrails and the barriers to say, hey, I don't want you doing this, or you need to think about this, which this video that I'm going to talk about, what it does is it helps highlight like there's a lot of stuff we often don't think about. So what it was there was this video game that they had trained AI to play. It was a little boat and it would zoom around the track and they were training it to get the most points possible, which seems pretty straightforward. And, you would think like, okay, over time, it's going to figure out how to go around this track and it's going to optimize the track and it's going to figure out if it cuts this corner this way and it avoids this obstacle or it'll find this shortcut, it'll do it perfect. Well, what happened is it discovered based on the game mechanics that if it ran over people, now I didn't make the game, so don't be like, well, what a terrible game, but that's not the point. But what it discovered is if it ran over people, it got like a point spree that actually was faster and gave more points at a more efficient rate than going around the track and optimizing the track. And so it, by its own learning, instantly shifted its strategy from optimizing its track, which was originally what it was trained to do, like go optimize the track. By accident, it got off track, and literally the video showed this thing. It like got off track and randomly hit this thing, and it picked up on the pattern. It was like, whoa, wait a minute, what did I just do there? And instead of completing the track from then on, it literally just started running over these people to get this point spree over and over and over again. And then they couldn't undo it because it had learned this is the most effective way to achieve the desired outcome that I was programmed to achieve. So I was programmed to achieve the most points possible in the least amount of time. I tried it this way. Ultimately, I discovered this, even though by the game definition, that's a horrific way to accomplish it. And you would never want to do it that way. And then, like I said, it wouldn't let them shut the game down because it was like, well, this is exactly what you wanted me to do. Now, I'm sure anybody watching and listening to this could start thinking of all the, Skynet doomsday possibilities of where this kind of stuff could go. I didn't tell this story and explain this video to try and get people thinking about that so much as to go, wow, now I can see how if you didn't understand all of the mechanics of the game, you would have never in your wildest dreams imagined that this AI model would accidentally get off course, discover this random series of, I bet the game designer just didn't even think about that. But because it was happening at such speed and such scale, it was able to discover this hidden pattern that it then just exploited. And then once they caught it, trying to shut it down was a heck of a lot harder than that. And so it opens up the complexity of, holy cow, how many of these other things, as we think about all the stuff I've been describing up to this point, how many unanswered questions have we not even asked? Or maybe we didn't even know is authored into the blueprints of the stuff we're doing with this stuff that we think is simple. Well, obviously, what I want is this, but we don't understand that the mechanics of how to get that may actually be really bad. And a practical example of this, where I've seen this go wrong from an HR standpoint, okay, is spot bonuses. So there's a lot of times I've done a lot of work with companies, especially like in the sales space, where they'll do like spiffs or spot bonuses for certain things that they're trying to incentivize. And humans are notorious for doing the same thing AI does. So a company will go, we're going to give a spiff, we're going to give a spot bonus for this specific thing because we want that. We want this thing to happen. But nobody took the time to slow down and go, yeah, but what if people end up only doing that? What other negative outcomes might come? And I've been with companies where they're like, we're going to implement a spot bonus or a spiff to try and incentivize this thing. And then all of a sudden, some other metric just goes like off the chain sideways, and they can't figure out what happened. And it's all because people picked up on this. And again, people just like AI will start telling other people, hey, did you know that if you just do this, like, yay, we're incentivizing visits, customer visits. So all you got to do is show up. You don't even have to do anything, you know, whatever, but just get as many visits as you can. Well, now customer quality tanks. And you go, well, wait a minute, we didn't want customer quality to go down with this. And I've seen it spiral out of control. And now when you think strapping AI on top of that, how this can happen at exponential levels where you may not even be able to draw this back, or by the time you draw it back, the damage might be so great you might not be able to recover from it, is a reality that we have to think about. Now, you might think, like some of my other ones, wow, thanks for scaring the living crap out of me, Christopher. I'm really great to know that we can now destroy ourselves that much faster. That's not the point of me sharing this, because in every case I've been in, we are able to figure out, ways around it and things like this. My point in bringing this up is this is another reason why, one, we need to slow down and think things through before we just run out and charge and say, let's have AI do this. What could possibly go wrong? And every week I feel like I've got some example of something that happened. Last week it was Reddit. Oh, what do you know? Hey, let's hook up Reddit. What could possibly go wrong? Oh, it tells people who are depressed to jump off the bridge. We need to slow down and think through some of these things and think through, hey, how do we do this right? And I, for one, am one to move relatively quickly. So people who have worked with me know I'm not one to sit back and just kind of sit on my laurels. But there is something extremely powerful about being thoughtful and strategic about thinking about what are we not thinking about? What other things might we need to consider? I think the second aspect that I think this should encourage everyone to do, and this is a best practice whether you're talking about AI or not, is how do we make sure we're including diverse perspectives into those conversations? I think one of the biggest risks that I see with some of this AI stuff is there's not a lot of diversity in these conversations. And so you've got a lot of people with very similar points of view, very similar perspectives, and they're all sitting together going, hey, what if we did this? Anybody think of any reasons that could go wrong? No, none of you? No? Oh, all right. Well, then we're probably fine. Where if we had a diverse group of people, somebody would have raised their hand and said, yeah, the problem with that though is this is going to happen. And I think we, one, need to not only be making sure that we're building diverse groups of people who bring points of views we don't want to hear, because that's the second half of it. What can happen is you can bring a diverse group of folks around, but if that diverse group of folks figures out that whenever they raise their hand, they either get backhanded or just straight up ignored, pretty soon those voices disappear. And then you go, well, look, see, we have a diverse group of people and nobody's saying anything. And instead of going, well, is it that they're not saying anything because they don't actually see a problem? Or is it that they're terrified to actually raise their hand and say, there's a problem, because whenever they do that, they get lambasted for it. And so I think this is going to be extremely critical. And this safety video, such a simple and brilliant way to illustrate it. So thank you, Robert, for showing that. And I really liked how I've shared this with a number of people this week as I've talked about how these unintended consequences can spiral out of control so quickly, and why it means we should be being thoughtful and discerning about where we're going, and including and encouraging diverse and dissenting points of view. And just because somebody disagrees or raises a risk doesn't mean you necessarily stop. It just means you might go, well, we definitely need to take that into consideration. And what might we need to do? Maybe we need to slow down a little bit and build a mitigation plan. Maybe we do ultimately need to go, you know what, the risk of that is too great. But I think you will only do that if you actually invite that. And I've been there myself. It's obviously frustrating when you have differing opinions. There's a lot of things I could accomplish a heck of a lot faster if people would just stop telling me why my ideas aren't always brilliant and wonderful and everything's great about them. But I surround myself with people like that and create an environment where they aren't afraid to tell me those things, so that when they tell me, I go, thank you. I didn't consider that. And again, are we going to be perfect at this? No, but I am very concerned with how quickly things are moving and what that might mean for things. So, speaking of speed, let's transition over to this one, because this is a fun, an interesting one. So, another video I came across this week that was showing how AI agents, multiple AI agents, can work together to accomplish things. And let me just tell you, if you have epilepsy, don't go try and find this video. All right, just don't even go look for it. You'll go into an epileptic seizure, I promise, because trying to track what was even happening on the screen was downright impossible. And what it was doing was it was actually building a website and website automations and a workflow all in real time. So there were 3 different AI agents working together to do all this. So one was sharing what the workflow was, one was actually going into the HTML and actually writing the website, and then the other one was actually connecting the automations to the other systems. And I'm not kidding. Watching this video, I was like, holy smokes, this is moving really quick. And at the end, I saw the finished product and it did a really good job. So, some of the concerns people have about, man, is AI really going to come for jobs and industries and careers? It is. And watching this video was yet another reminder to me that, yeah, there are going to be people who have not only maybe their jobs disrupted, but eliminated, because AI agents are able to do it at a pace and speed that is just honestly beyond anything that I think most people could even imagine. So I think that's a legitimate concern. And I think but rather than just worrying about that, as I was watching this workflow, the whole time I was watching it, I was sitting there thinking about, but what role would a human play in this? Because yes, this thing is moving lightning fast, but ultimately, going back to my previous point about the safety video, if something was wrong, it's going to happen faster than any human being can catch it. I'm just picturing, like, imagine you're on an assembly line and your job is to quality control things that move fast. And then this thing starts moving at the speed of sound. You're just going to go, I don't know. I mean, I sure hope these things are good, type of a thing. And so I think this goes back to organizations needing to be not just dazzled by some of this AI agent stuff where they go, wow, imagine what we could accomplish in an afternoon if we just had AI agents just whizzing through this crap. Yeah, maybe, but you might get to the end of the day and go, we just made $100 million mistake that we didn't catch because we just shipped, 89,000 truckloads of supplies that never got QC'd. So I think for leaders, it's going to be really important, and even for employees to be thinking about, like, hey, where are these intentional stop points and how many do we need to have? Where do we put them? And also the planning going into things. Going back to my point from earlier about making sure we have people who are thinking ahead of what are some of the hiccups, what are some of the bend points that we're going to need to consider, so we can be really thoughtful and intentional about, putting those intentional human in the loop points to go, yeah, maybe we don't want it to go from A to Z with pure agents, because it's a lot harder to deconstruct the thing once it gets to Z than maybe if throughout the alphabet, at D and H and N and whatever, we've got a couple stop points to go, Like, are we good? Everything looking okay here? Anything we need to feed back to the machine to change what it's doing? Okay, no, we're going to move it forward. We're going to see where it's at. And for people I've talked to have said, well, isn't the need for subject matter experts going to go away with AI? I think absolutely not, because this is exactly the kind of expertise. So if you're someone who has deep domain expertise, your domain expertise is going to become exponentially valued because you're going to be able to be the one who's able to look at it and go, hang on, something's off here with this. And this idea that, well, AI will just self course correct, it'll just fix itself. No, it won't. And I think last week's point on the Reddit thing should be an obvious answer, as it's giving out these terrible ideas. Not only one, is it just not going to catch things, but two, people sometimes just, there's a lot of trolls out there who just will love to watch it burn. And you're going to have people that go, ha, ready? Here we go. Tell it that's a good idea and let's see what happens. And so I think there's some of these things that, we need to be really mindful of as we move forward with it. Now, something else that I thought was interesting that Elon Musk came out, which regardless of how you feel about the guy, what he says is always sometimes, well, it's entertaining, borderline offensive, but there's always something that I end up listening to it going, what is he actually saying here? And how should we think about that? And one of the things that, and of course, he's got a stake in the game on this. But one of the things that Elon said that to me was concerning is he said basically human beings are going to have to become hybrid creatures to keep up with this. And let me just go on the record saying I vehemently disagree with that. Now, when we say human beings will have to be hybrid, I guess it depends on what you mean by hybrid. Like, will our technology advance and will we be involved in some of that? And I mean, technically, we're hybrid creatures now because we use computers and we talk to people through screens and we do this other stuff. So we are already in some ways hybrid, but that wasn't really what he was getting at. And if you know what Musk is doing with Neuralink and all this stuff, he's all about like the full merging of humans and machines. And the sense I got from his comment was that's actually what he's getting at, is that we are going to have to fully merge with machines to be able to keep pace with this stuff. And first of all, one, from a just overall health and well-being, I don't think that's going to be in the best interest of people in many ways for a lot of different reasons. But it just goes against what I continue to see as the pace of life, the pace of work, the pace of things just continues to pick up, is the power of the pause is actually becoming more and more and more important than it has ever been. And what I don't think is helpful about Musk's perspective is it's just this idea, and it makes sense given who he is and some of the stuff he does. But he comes from this worldview where it's just like faster is always better, and just moving constantly, nonstop, is going to net a better result. And diminishing returns prove otherwise. The data is clear on this. Us just charging forward at faster and faster speeds and going, how do we avoid breaks? How do we make people transhumans so they don't have to breathe or sleep or whatever, so they can run at whatever paces? And well, let's just make machines that do it at exponential speeds so that they can make up for the losses of human. This drumbeat is not good, in my opinion. And I think we're going to see the fallout of some of this stuff. And I've seen this with organizations. I mean, again, nothing is new under the sun. And the fact we think that, oh, well, technology will fix this problem, it won't. It won't fix this problem. I have seen this my whole career. I have read case studies. I have studied human history in this, where when we push, eventually it starts to fall apart. And because we've just been pushing, there's no strength, there's no stability left to even try and restabilize and hold things back up. And pretty soon the whole thing falls in on itself. And when it does, it falls in colossal fashion. It's not just a small okay, well, we'll just pivot from this. And I think that's one of the concerns I had as I watched this AI agent speed video and then Musk going, yeah, instead of going, how do we build intentional stop points and pause points to make sure that we're thinking critically about this and anticipating this? Instead, it's, no, how do we make ourselves hybrid machines so that we can just move and not be a bottleneck to this just relentless pace that we're pushing forward? I I'm sure there would be people that will disagree with me who think we should just march faster, run quicker, sleep less, all this, and it'll just be a benefit to everyone. I think, again, I guess it depends on what you're measuring, but ultimately, everything I've ever seen is it doesn't end well. And not just from a, well, be happy being poor then. Like that bro talk, it's just so not helpful and stupid. It just doesn't work that way. And what quality of life is that? Forget the performance side. What quality of life is that? What are you working towards anyway? Let's say we're able to move it 1,000 times the speed we are today. To what end? So that you can die having accomplished 1,000 more things than you would have. Big freaking deal. And not saying I'm not someone to try and push us harder and do more. I know I do that for myself, but I think at some point we got to go, where do we draw that line? And I'm not seeing that line being drawn. Instead, I'm seeing people just go, it's great. We can move even faster. And if we can just get these darn humans who keep slowing things down, who need to rest, who need to think, to want to think critically about this stuff and think about long-term implications. Let's just get them out of the way so we can achieve progress. I think that's going to blow up in colossal fashion. And so I hope we start to see a shift. I know from my personal experience, I'm seeing more and more people who are stepping in, not saying slow down as in like turn off the AI, but go, how are we being more thoughtful? And how is the work that we're doing more meaningful? Yeah, maybe it happens faster, but how is it not just faster for the sake of faster, but how are we improving quality? How are we improving other things? There's more to life than just getting through it really fast. And so I hope we continue to see a shift in this because I don't think it's going to be good for people. I don't think it's going to be good for society. And ultimately, I don't think it's going to be good for performance. You might see some short term performance lifts from this kind of thinking, but in the long term, my experience and my observations have always been, in the end, it doesn't end well. So those are the biggest ones. I had a couple other ones that I didn't get to, but I don't want to just keep going on. So hopefully you found this helpful. Those are the latest things that have been bouncing around in my head. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. I will be back next week is the plan, unless something dramatic happens. But other than that, I hope you have a great week and a great weekend, and we will see you on the other side.